I'm assuming everyone here is married to a member of the clergy. We always want to specify that even friends of the population who are not themselves married to clergy love to see you, but this isn't for that group. This is just for us. So I'm inviting anybody who is not married to clergy to um, excuse themselves. One last bit of housekeeping. I'd like to introduce Jane in case you don't know her and see maybe if Jane, you could just say a little bit about the Partners Path and which is kind of the thing that undergirds this whole project though.
Well, hi, I'm Jane, and I am the director of the Partners Path. And we are, in case you didn't know this, we're a safe space for spouses of Episcopal clergy, although we did vote that clergy from non-Episcopal traditions are also welcome to join us. Um, and we're just glad that you're here. We are always looking for new ways to serve this population, so feel free to reach out to me if there are groups that you'd like to see exist or content or anything, but we're just glad you're here.
Maybe you'd put your email address in the chat.
I will love to do that, but y'all probably have received a bunch of emails from me as well, but I will also put it in the chat.
Thanks. Okay, so happy to welcome Polly Ingraham to our space. So great to see you. She's um, a New Englander, lives in New Hampshire with her husband. And I would like for you, if you would please, Polly, to just introduce yourself, sort of as we discussed, maybe the Reader's Digest version, like where'd you grow up? Were you a religious kid growing up? Just kind of some stuff about you to put you in context.
Okay. Well, you start by saying that I'm a New Englander, and gives me a chance to say that I'm at an important sort of a poignant moment in my life this week. Actually, I'm headed down, and my friend Sue on the call is, I know, just my age. We went through school at about the same time, so she probably is going to smile when I say I'm headed to my 50th high school reunion. Because many of us have been having them. And I had a big college reunion in the spring, and I'm headed down to my place of my roots, which is Long Island, New York. And so I'm not originally a New Englander. I've been a New Englander ever since college, but I'm headed down for a big weekend and a couple of book events down there too. It's also a poignant day for me today because this is the day that each of my parents died on this date, October 6th,
Wow.
14 years apart. And
Wow.
that's was something my brothers and I have been talking about that during the course of today because, we think about them all the time, as of course we all think about our parents. So I grew up on the North Shore of Long Island. And I still have a couple of brothers there. I grew up with four older brothers, and we were very deeply rooted where we lived. Never moved. I've since lost one of my beloved brothers. Think about him all the time. And I became a New Englander when I went to college in New England, and then worked at a couple of boarding schools up in New England. Um, Met Sue during that time, and then eventually met my husband Rob, and we've moved around New England a little bit. But no, going back to my childhood, an important fact about me is, and the reason, really one of the main reasons I wrote this book, is that I grew up without any church at all, which I've been reflecting on a lot in recent years. I grew up in a family with many you know strong values, strong community life, lots of activities, did not include church. So for me, and this is the gist of my story, marrying this particular man changed everything in my life, as it did for him too. So
I
that's
liked your
that's a little
your
bit
pointing.
about who I am.
I liked you pointed out that you had a multi-generational lack of religion. So that's a real
Yeah.
that's really turning the ship
Yeah,
around.
I had a grandmother who was very Quaker, and wanted us to go to meeting with her, and we did go to meeting with her on Long Island, and that was great. But we didn't, as a family, we had been, my parents had both been Methodist a couple generations before their forebears, but it had not continued. And I never thought that was particularly odd until I fell in love with this particular man. And then learned that look at all of these people are going to church.
Yeah. Did you have, Polly, when you were a young person, did you have any sense of being a spiritual being? Did you have a belief in angels, or did you kind of have a sense of the spiritual life, or was that not the
Yeah,
case because there was no church?
yeah,
Because they're not the same.
I think that's a lot of what I've been wondering too. I think I did. And in my case, and in the case of many members of my family, it had a lot to do with nature.
Mhm.
We were blessed with a wonderful outdoors where I grew up. We spent a lot of time outside, and with animals. And so my spiritual sense, and I try to write a little bit about this in my book, in my memories, uh, really has to do with a kinship with nature.
Mm, that's nice. Well, one of the things that when in my experience, when clergy spouses get together, one of the typical questions is, did you know when you met him or her what they were going to do? Or did you marry into it? Did you?
Hmm.
So you described in your book, through you were all the way through your 20s and into your 30s when you met
Yeah,
him. So
yeah, I'll say.
yeah.
We met at a very interesting point, Kathy. Again, which I thought was worth describing in my story. We met at a point, we married, I was 33 when we got married. So we met just a year and a half before that. He's younger. Um, we met through mutual friends of a school that we had both been associated with. And it was a very, very important time in Rob's life because he was just returning to divinity school. He had left divinity school for various reasons. He had become a banker. And I met him when I was working in Boston in a public school, and he was a banker. But he had made the decision to return to divinity school. In this case, he'd started at General, and he was going to return this time to Yale. And so the decision that he made was, extremely important for his life. And he explained it to me as best he could, why he was going back to divinity school. The people he worked with at the bank thought he was nuts. But he explained it to me and I understood. But at the same time, he was explaining to me not only why he was going to divinity school, but his faith as a whole. And it was all new to me.
Mm,
But we
mm,
were, as I try to show in the book, we were absolutely falling in love. So whatever the circumstances were with either one of us almost didn't matter because
right,
that's the way love can kind of take you over.
right. One of the things that I like to acknowledge out loud, I think it's something that we know, but we don't always say it out loud, is that any conversation of this type walks people in the ministry life, people who are married to, living with, partnered with clergy. This conversation walks the razor's edge between uh, our church is here, and what does your husband do? And oh, I see that you're retiring. Well, actually, no, my husband is retiring, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's so tricky. We have to be really disciplined about talking to each other as human beings and not just like what is your church like, you know? Do you well, I want to get back to your thing here. Trying to not have the rabbit trails. We got some stuff in the chat cleaning up. Polly's disclosure that everything changed with her husband makes me wonder how others here felt that moment that they learned or realized their spouse would be clergy. Louise's husband was a Catholic priest when they met.
Mm.
Yeah. Jane met her husband the day before he was ordained. I married a swimming coach, and then he went to seminary 3 months later. So before I rabbit trailed myself, I want to say what we're looking for here is the common thread that we all share. There's so much that we all share, even though our situations are different, our stories might look different, our experiences might be different on paper, but there is a common thread. So with regard to that, one of the things you mentioned in your book is all the moving.
Yep.
I want to talk about the idea of moving. But I think that the correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the foundation for that idea of moving is rooted in your own sense of place as a young person. Your family, you said we never went anywhere. So can you talk a little bit about?
No, it's not that we never went anywhere, but we were strongly rooted to our hometown.
Sure. That's what I mean.
Yeah, right. And there wasn't even any prospect that we might move somewhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come into your consciousness as a married person? Like, we're probably gonna be moving around.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, pretty soon, I learned that, there's a first church and then there's a next church. And then if you're lucky, you're ambitious and reasonably ambitious, you might want to be at a bigger church. And each time it's like, stepping stones.
Well, let's get you to hold the book up, if you
Okay.
wouldn't mind, so that people will know.
Yep.
This is Polly has just released it and is in the middle of going places and signing things
I
and
am.
reading. So maybe Jane could put that in the chat so that people can. I know I got my copy from Amazon. I know it's available, and I've asked Polly, would you read that bit starting on page 102?
Yeah.
We're
And
talking about the moving.
I think you mean 107.
At the very beginning of chapter 16,
Oh, okay.
there's those 2 paragraphs on that
Okay,
very
I'll
first
write
page.
that. And first, I just want to say to everyone who's maybe seeing this for the first time, it was really, really hard to find a title for this book. I worked on it for many months, and I worked on it with other people. And so this, as many of you know, often when you're titling a book, you don't want something too cumbersome and too long. And this word occurred to me sort of late in the process, and it might be startling to some people. And it's not the full story, but it's at least a good hunk of what my experience has been, is, essentially staying who I am through a lot of changes and a lot of family building, and also really discovering who I am and making certain shifts along the way. So,
Well, I would be interested to know if that's anybody else's experience in this
sure,
group.
please say, yeah,
Staying who you are.
right. So this is the beginning of the chapter, Cathy, the
Please.
upheaval.
Yeah.
When we first arrived in Storrs, which is where the University of Connecticut is, somewhere at the back of my mind floated an understanding that my husband's first run in charge of a church would be just that, his first. After all, he needed to keep growing in his vocation, or to use a term common in secular professions, one that he himself sometimes used, partly tongue-in-cheek, he needed to advance. He'd get stale, surely, staying under the same steeple for too long. But here we land on a common challenge in marriage, at least in our particular marriage. Because of how my childhood played out, I'm someone who, when a few years go by, begins to send down roots deep into the earth, gets comfortable, in for a long stay alongside my companions. Here is where we are, I tell myself, and so let's do some flourishing. The future, that's off in the mist somewhere. This love the ones you're with approach is sensible enough in a clergy family until a certain gong from somewhere off stage sounds, signaling it's time to move. Then suddenly the sweet little church on the edge of campus becomes more like one little planet within a huge universe that is the entire church. And leaving the neighborhood becomes a kind of casualty, like collateral damage. Spaceships, it turned out, were available for us. Rob always knew this. He knew that his adult life would consist of strapping in for takeoffs and unbuckling for arrivals. From his perspective, everywhere he'd land would be, in some way, familiar. It would be up to me to find the best approach to getting on board.
I could just let that sit for a minute. Thank you so much for that. I would be glad to have people's reactions to that feeling of, as she said, for him, it's going to be familiar. He's just going to go to a different place. It's going to be a lot the same. But for me, it's a whole new thing. Well, so that's the theoretical moving. You also later in that chapter talk about the very specific experience of him looking for a job, and they
Yep.
set up an interview just for you, right?
Yes, they did.
Which I think I would like to hear about. And that's the passage that starts at the top of 107.
Yep.
And I'm going to invite the folks that are here to keep sharing if there's anything in here that resonates with an experience that you've had, if there was a time that you went on an interview, would love to hear it. So Polly, would you mind reading that passage?
Yeah. So I went on they gave me a tour around the town, and it was clear they were really excited about my husband coming there. Why wouldn't they be? He's terrific. So, with church, home, and school, three main pillars of the new life awaiting me, identified, my guides thoughtfully turned their attention to the kind of employment I might want to seek. This presumably could be my fourth pillar, job. They knew that I'd been working to help welfare recipients become self-sufficient, so they were ready with suggestions of organizations I might try to contact to get set up in that same field. So-and-so in the church works at such and such, and she'd be very glad to speak with you about how to start networking. They genuinely wanted to help me, and I was duly impressed by their research. But at the same time, I couldn't let go of the fact that their motivation was springing from what they wanted, my husband as their priest. And that in turn might have been a good thing for him in isolation as a clergyman, but we were married and must make big decisions together. It felt complicated, as if I had to see my way clearly through a process of weighing what had real value and what did not. That afternoon, I had, in a way, been watching one long commercial, preparing to discuss with Rob later whether or not we as a couple should decide to buy. I think I can research some of those organizations once I get back home, I said, on the drive back to where my own car was parked. Thank you all so much for the hospitality. It's been quite overwhelming. And that was the truth. When I got back in the car, I felt unsettled. Inside me, the weather was humid and stuffy, and storm clouds were rumbling off in the distance. On the one hand, I'd been given a kind of red carpet treatment, been the center of attention all afternoon. Anything I uttered was deemed important. On the other hand, I was being shown all the elements of a potential life I hadn't had any role in creating. There was a kind of automatic fit mentality. People might as well have said, we think we understand what you care about, and look, it's all provided right here. Oddly, it didn't really matter if each individual piece they showed me gleamed adequately, leaving nothing to be desired. The whole process hollowed me out. I'd done too much world building in the place where we lived to let go of it easily and start over. With 2 kids happy at their school, a toddler beginning to make friends at play groups, a part-time job that suited me, the vistas of Horse Barn Hill, and the close-knit neighborhood, I felt that I had climbed a kind of tree, branch by branch, achieving a perch that I was in no hurry to relinquish. Recalling how it felt to be 8 and gazing out over a swath of green toward a blue expanse of glimmering water, I knew that some of the treasures we earn, we must try to keep.
Thank you. Did you go there?
We did not go there. And my husband didn't ask me a lot of questions. He sort of nodded and sighed and said, okay, we'll keep looking. Just didn't feel right to me. And he didn't try to make it feel right to me, which I respected all the years. I'm seeing here now what my friend Sal, who moved, I want to just say she moved here all the way from England for her husband's job, and her family is in England. So it was a very big move for her. And what she says here is moving for clergy often means the clergy person has to sever ties with their old parish, but the spouse and their family often want to keep those connections going. This can be a big difference in approach. And I think that's probably an experience a number of people have had too. I know I certainly did, particularly when we moved here we spent 12 years in Amherst. We had an extensive network, Amherst, Mass. We had an extensive network of friends, such a rich, layered life of so many people we knew there. And I realized when we moved here that for my husband, he was, and this is understandable. He had a big job here to do, and he plugged in right away. And people here were welcoming him right away, all around the state. He felt literally plugged in. I did not. I kept, visiting. I was going back to visit my old friends, and I remember a very important part in our marriage, which I wonder if other people have had, where he was quite startled. He said, "You're going back to Amherst again? Like you're going to see them again?" And I said, "I got news for you. Like, this is going to take me a while. These are the friends that I raised my children with. And I'm going to try to meet them halfway a lot of the time if I can. And that's mostly what I do now. But I'm not letting them go."
Yeah.
And then it's been a very beautiful thing for the two of us that he gradually learned to understand he's not going to be that way himself, but he respects that I'm that way.
The thing that I've always wondered about with regard to jobs is that it's hard to compete with God. You know, I might be a really successful banker, but how can how is it not more important to follow Jesus? Which
Well, I don't know.
which is the title of your book, your Unconverted. That was not a struggle for you.
Whatever one individual does for a profession, and this is my actual job. I work in a school as a school to career coordinator, and I'm there to help any teenager in the school try to discern what their future might be. And anyone can feel the same excitement and sense of enthusiasm and direction and purpose for a whole range of jobs.
Um, Holly, let's talk about the kids. You had a moment where you described we're going to sign up for soccer, and he said, well, that's fine as long as they're still available on Sunday. Can you talk about that
Yeah.
tension between church is important, but
Mm-hmm.
making a life for
Sure.
the kids?
Thank you. I those of you, the few of you, my friends on the call have read the book, and they know what I'm referring to, is that I wrestled for a long time in writing this book how to weave together sort of the church segment. I go through an entire morning at church in the book. And then I have a lot of material that has to do with kids sports, because our kids were all active in sports, and I was the primary parent doing that. So there was a sense of constantly back and forth, and also some values came into play, which were very interesting between me and my husband in those days. He's a tremendous athlete himself. He's a rower, loves sports, has nothing against sports, but he had some skepticism for the way sports were swallowing up, the way that the time was increasing, the miles were increasing, all of it was increasing. And for me, this is what I try to describe in this section, is I grew up believing that, with these older brothers, was never a sport we didn't like. We had people over our outside playing everything imaginable. And there was nothing ever anything bad about it. However, I think those of you who are on the call who have raised kids know which I'm referring to, which is that in recent years, the ante has been upped. And so what was interesting about raising our kids in this time with my husband as a parish priest was not just the Sunday factor, because, we had a daughter who played hockey, and there was regular Sunday morning hockey. So was that a reason not to play hockey? I didn't think so. And he didn't really think so either, but it was a challenge to figure it out. And not just because of the Sunday morning. It sort of spilt out over what's important here and why, and what's important in our children's upbringing and why. And so those were some rich conversations we had. They were also pretty stressful, because as people know who are raising children, you're always dashing around doing all these things. But at a certain point, what I realized was interesting about our marriage and what was happening in our life was that we were, the two of us, trying to get a hold of what we each believed about this, often based on our early lives, and what we would forge together as a married couple. And it was not easy, but it was very important.
When did
The
you,
part about signing up on soccer, again, some people here know, for our older son, it wasn't just, good enough to play soccer. He was playing baseball in spring, but the soccer team was at that point all year round. And the soccer coach was saying, you have to play soccer in the spring too. And we knew in our hearts, we knew this is ridiculous. But this was the culture.
Mhm.
And this is what his friends were doing. And this is not easy stuff as parents.
So obviously you're a very thoughtful person. You've been thinking hard about all of this from the get-go. How did it come to pass that you thought, what I need to do is I need to write a book?
Yeah.
And how long did that take you? And what has been the gift of that process? It's taken a while, yes?
Yeah. Um, yeah, thanks for asking. I started writing portions of this, like the kid sports part, back when we lived in Amherst. And I didn't know at that point. I wrote two hunks early on. I wrote about how Rob and I fell in love. That seemed important to me to try to capture. We married about a year and a half after we met. I wrote about that, and then I wrote about all these sports all the time. And I was trying to make sense of it along with church. And then I didn't yet know how the book would have a structure. So an important moment came for me is after we moved here, and I had a lot of material, but I really wasn't sure how to shape it into a book. And I'm a voracious reader. I've been reading all my life. As Sue and I know, we were at Bread Loaf together. Um, and I had a sense that I had a book in me, but I wasn't sure how to make it. So I decided to go to a program in Boston. Some of you may have heard of. It's called Grub Street, and it's a writing center, quite a, really, really wonderful one. And they had a program called the Incubator. They have one for the novel and they have one for memoir. And what they describe it is, they say, we come, if you have, a hunk of your book written, let's say you have 50 pages, but you're not sure how to keep going, come here for a year and we will work with you in a class and you will leave with with the first draft. And I read that blurb, and you know how all of you on the call must have moments in your life like this, where something happens and it clicks and you say, that's what I need to do. And that's what I said. And I said, this is the program that's going to help me get my book finished. And so I went and did that for a whole year. I went once a week down to Boston. It is quite a long drive. But by the end of it, gosh, I had a first draft. And then it was another couple of years working on the draft. And then it was another couple of years starting to, as those of you know the word, query for publication. And that was enormously difficult, I'll just say. And we knew it would be, those of us in the class. I mean, it's a little bit, finding a literary agent is a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack. It's not if you're Prince Harry or if you're Taylor Swift but for most people, very, very challenging.
Mm.
So
Has there been
but I didn't, the thing I'm sort of pleased to say is I didn't give up.
Mm.
I had come too far to give up. And I'd worked too hard. And I had my husband's support. And I had a story. And so I kept trying, and then I found this wonderful little publisher in Vermont called Rootstock. And they got my manuscript and they said, we love your book. We'd like to publish your book. And then it was another year. So it was probably about 12 years altogether.
Have you found in the process of, writing is such a famous method for finding clarity. Have you learned things as you were telling stories? The material is familiar to you, but have you found that you understood things differently, or you came to a place of a gift, or how has
Somewhat.
that?
I think one strand of the story, which I hope people will see, they haven't read it yet, is my struggling to figure out what do I believe? Because I married this person who was so clear on what he believed. I was amazed that he could articulate it to me so clearly, what he believed and how much it guided his life. And then I thought, oh, what have I got like that?
Mhm.
And do I have something that I've never really recognized, maybe? And maybe I better think more about this. So that's one piece. And then also, I don't want this program to end without saying something that I hope people will smile about, which is that I think through a long marriage, you learn, no matter what your occupation of your spouse is, you learn that your home or your time together is a lot about providing each other with comfort and support. And when you're out there in the world doing what you're doing, and with the challenges that you've got in the particular work that you have, and very much so for clergy people, I don't even need to tell you, it's draining. And so I've learned that a lot of what sustains a marriage is taking care of one another.
Mm-hmm. You
And
made the point.
not so much talking about your work, but just understanding what the other person needs in the moment.
Yeah. And it's a mystery. You use the word mystery about your own marriage.
Yeah.
Other people's marriage. We can't know what's
No.
happening. It's a mystery. I'm so grateful to you for your vulnerability and for your willingness to talk. We've got a couple of more minutes. I wonder if anybody's got anything that they wanted to say. Sal, you said you wrote something that might be nice to hear in your voice. Are you able to talk on the phone?
Hmm.
Maybe I'll just read it. Polly, you're an amazing teacher and counselor. I know how committed you are to the kids you work with. You are as passionate about your work as Rob is his. Congratulations on writing and publishing your book while you continue to work. It's an incredible achievement. You write beautifully and honestly. I could not put the book down. That's
It's
nice.
very sweet. Thank you.
I saw an interview one time with a guy who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and he said, I have found that the more specific and the more granular I get about writing about my own life, my own personal life, the more letters I get from people. The more specific I am about my story, the more universal. Um, and I know that people will have that experience when they read your story. They'll find their own story in it. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here and uh, for the good heart that you bring to your life and for sharing it in this space. I think it's a really wonderful thing that we do. I'm so grateful to you, Polly, for your time and for your care and for um, your
Thank you.
emails. We worked it out. We worked out. Um, Next month, on November 3rd, I will be talking to Michael Lawyer, who is a clergy spouse in the Diocese of Indianapolis, and he's a beekeeper and a really interesting guy who works for HUD, and we're going to talk to him on November 3rd at 7 o'clock Central.